Welcome to the official release of the second installment of the Marching Percussion Playbook. Before we get started, guys, can you just tell me, where are we right now? What parts of the country are we in? Fresno, Tupelo, Apple Valley, Minnesota, Paragould, Arkansas, Houston, Texas, Chattanooga, Tennessee, Normal, Orlando. So today's installment, guys, is entitled Timing is Everything. When I'm teaching my students, a lot of the times when we get into more advanced skill sets like F, G, and H, you're playing, and all of a sudden you realize that they're struggling with this skill set that's further down the road because they didn't spend enough time playing some of the things that were previous, like the foundational items, i.e. timing. Today I just wanted to show you guys a couple things that I learned, explain a couple concepts. I'm going to walk you through the actual product, show you what's inside the Marching Percussion Playbook 2. And real quick, for those of you who have checked out the first installment, which is Marching Percussion Playbook 421, thank you so much, Blvd Percussion, Gerard Gates, Greg Malleus, Colin, the guys who are in the room right now. Thanks for checking out the product and supporting. Really appreciate it. So timing is everything. And here's the first page, and you can tell that if this is your first time seeing the product, it's a combination of text explanation, things that I share with my students and I teach in lessons all the time. But this is literally maybe 4 or 5 lessons worth of information condensed into one handout. When I was doing the Periscope sessions and I realized that there was just so much more information that I could share in a handout, much more than I could share in just a 1-hour Periscope session. Your ability to control and manipulate the pulse is one of the most essential core skills of being a musician. If you've ever tried to play drum set to a click track, it becomes very apparent whether or not you can hold steady time. I made this realization when I was in high school. Every time I played a fill, I would rush and come out earlier than on beat 1. One of the things that you notice immediately about someone when you're playing with other musicians is their sense of time. You know, is it easy to play with them because you can predict what's going to happen? They're keeping a steady pulse, or are they moving around all over the place, and as the other musician, you're constantly chasing them, trying to find them and lock your time in with them? This is not a step-by-step, do this first, do this, do this. These are just concepts and exercises that you can use to help develop your time. Time concept. Imagine that every beep of the metronome is a circle. And when you're playing, you can play either on the beat, ahead of the beat, or behind the beat. So let's say you're playing, right? Here's a metronome. Here's 104. I'm trying to play right in the center of the downbeat. Let's just play 8 on a hand to demonstrate. That's on the beat. Then you can do what's called playing ahead of the beat. So you're just playing slightly on top of the metronome. It's still in time because it's consistent, but it's just a little bit on top of the beat. On the beat. Ahead of the beat. Back to on the beat. And then you can actually play behind the beat. Back to on, behind, back to on, ahead, back to on. When you start talking about these concepts and thinking about these concepts, your awareness to your personal timing and how it relates to other musicians starts increasing. Your ability to perceive and notice changes in your timing starts getting much, much stronger. This is from the teacher's perspective, is that there's so many times when I'm sitting in a lesson and I'm working with a student and I'm demonstrating something to them and they're playing back and it's not quite right, you know, and I realize it's like they can't perceive that they're slightly ahead or behind the beat or on the beat. And since I've started talking about this concept to my students and explaining it to them and demonstrating it to them, we now have this common language, this same foundation for us to go and be able to converse about what's happening in a musical and informed way. So when something's not quite right, I can say, okay, now do you hear that? You're slightly ahead of the beat right now, or we're trying to play right on the beat. And this explanation usually takes like 3 minutes, maybe 5 minutes to explain to a beginning student. But it's one of those things where if you plant the seed or this concept in their head early on, then there's so many things that help them later on down the road because they're aware of this idea, and when they're playing they can think about it and listen for it. It's a combination of text examples that you can see from the handout. This particular one came out to be 20 pages, which is like 5 or 6 pages even more than the first issue. But there's 20 pages in this one, and these are the exercises that come. So what I do in the handout is I talk about how these exercises apply to the concepts that we're looking at. One of the things we talk about is how your feet synchronize with your hands and what you should be hearing or auditing inside your head as you're playing some of these timing patterns. 1 E-enda, 2 E-enda, and you're playing E-enda, E-enda. In your head, you should hear a bass drum because that's what your foot is being placed on. So it's like chicka-ticka, chicka-ticka, puka-ticka, puka-ticka, chicka-ticka, chicka-ticka, puka-ticka, puka-ticka. Right? As I'm playing this, in my head I hear that foot, hand, 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 foot, hand, hand, hand. I'm listening for that composite rhythm. And if you've ever played drum set before, I mean, this is going to make perfect sense to you. But what I've realized is a lot of times when people are playing marching percussion, this might be their first time of figuring out how to combine their hands with their feet, and they're not aware of this is what they should be listening for or feeling as they're playing. Here's another quote. There's no easy or hard, only familiar and unfamiliar. One of the things that people are really good about is they work their duple timing patterns, but you know, if you've played triplets in your book, you should also be working your triplet timing patterns, and a lot of times we overlook those things. If you work all these timing patterns individually, when you find them or see them in the music, you'll recognize them much faster, and then you'll be able to execute on them because your hands know how they're supposed to go, and your eyes recognize them, and your body is familiar with how those are supposed to feel. As perfect as center snares strive to be, there will always be specific idiosyncrasies to that player, and the job of the players outside of them is to listen and to adjust to what they're doing and to be able to, you know, condense certain rhythms or slur certain rhythms. Whatever it takes, your job is to match your inside guy so that the interpretation and performance of the music comes across as one unified line. This is the exercise portion. This is a duple flow timing pattern exercise that I start all my beginners with. 2-note duple timing patterns. We have 1-note timing patterns. We have our single stroke 7 or sextuplet timing patterns, and then of course our 12/8 timing patterns. One of the things that I discovered when I first started teaching was you can tell your students something all day, but almost 9 times out of 10, when they leave, they forget everything that you just said during rehearsal or during the lesson. You've got to have specific materials for them to reference when they're practicing alone at home. If I can say, hey, you need to work on timing number 4, pattern 3B, then they can go back and then they can look at the handout and say, oh, okay, this is the thing that I'm working on. As a practitioner, the practical side of things is that you want to have the materials and the handouts available for the students because everyone learns differently, and the most important thing is to set your students up for success. For the student's perspective, you get these handouts, and probably what's been happening is you've got 1 or 2 timing exercises that you play, but your job is to systematically work through all the most common timing patterns that you would see in the music, and if you practice them in an exercise format, when it comes time to play them in the music, you're not guessing or you're not hoping that your hands know what it's supposed to look like and feel like. I always tell my students this, which is hope is not an effective performance strategy. And what I mean by that is if you're hoping that you can play the right timing pattern or that you're hoping you can play the right rhythm, it's not going to happen. You should know before you play it whether or not you can do it. And the way you'll know that is if you've seen it before, you've practiced it, you've targeted it, you've isolated that specific timing pattern. And if you've worked that timing pattern with the metronome in practice, in rehearsal, when you see it in application in a music setting or a show setting or a performance setting, you're much more likely to be able to play it because you've targeted it and you've worked it before in that setting. So that's it, guys. That's the handout for the second installment of the Marching Percussion Playbook. Huei-Yuan.com. These are my social medias. All my social media handles are at Huei-Yuan Pan. If you'd like to find out more information about this particular handout, Huei-Yuan.com/MPP. There you'll find the landing page for the Marching Percussion Playbook. There are 2 installments out currently. There will be 5 in total. And again, I just want to say thanks so much to the people who have supported the first issue already. Thanks again for watching, guys. We'll see you next time. Bye.